Evolutionary Underground, episode number 25. Today is going to be a summer cutting Trenbolone with Geneza Pharma. Now, what better way to ring in the summer, okay, than talking about Tren? And a lot of guys like to use Tren during the summer because it can be one of the most lethal cutting steroids out there. And those of you who react really well to Tren, you can completely transform your body. And you can make yourself just in a short amount of time, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 10 weeks, 12 weeks, completely transform your body. So we're going to talk about strategies. We're going to talk about Geneza Pharma. They have 5 different Trenbolone options. We're going to talk about how to use each one, how to dose them. We're also going to talk about training, cardio, diet, and side effects. So this is the ultimate podcast that you're not going to want to miss. So definitely, this is the one right here if you want to know about Tren. So let's get right into it, Mobster. Let's talk about Geneza Pharma to start off with. Now, I know you're a big fan of Geneza Pharma as an MI. And Geneza Pharma has been around a long time. They're one of the most quality brands out there. Basically, what it means in my mind, Mobster, before I bring you in, if you use Geneza Pharma Tren, you know you're getting Tren. You know you're getting it dosed correctly. It's not going to be underdosed. It's not going to be overdosed. It's going to be dosed where it's supposed to be. And it's going to be the cleanest Tren out there because there is a lot of dirty Tren out there. It's going to be the cleanest Tren that you'll run out there. So we really love Geneza Pharma. It's a great brand. I've used their Tren. I know it's good. So Mobster, touch on Geneza Pharma. What do you like about them?
As you know, Steve, we have approved sources on our forums, and approved to me is going to be stuff like products that we know members have tried and tested, products that we know are dosed properly, products that we can find certificates of analysis on, a company that we know has been around for a long time. You and I have been around this game long enough in terms of training, 40-something years in my case, and certainly in terms of PED uses, 20 plus years, give or take. And we've seen labs come and go. Geneza, as you say, has been around a long time, and it ticks all the other boxes. So this is why you end up with companies like Geneza being part of our approved list. And so I said we can go back. You can go to Geneza's pharmaceuticals.biz website, guys, and you can see about the research and development of products, talking about history and their quality control. This is the kind of stuff we want, right? There are links to scamming and moody underground labs where you just literally would be seeing a series of bottles or a photograph of a box. There are stuff like that on Facebook and on Instagram, Steve. It's just, once you make a name, you and I make a name, we get this stuff. Our names are linked to it. They'll add us, and or this person who add themselves on our Instagram, and literally you go to their page and it's just a series of photographs of stacks of boxes and vials or whatever else. Zero information, no backup. You don't know if this guy started 5 minutes ago and he spent $5,000 and got a bunch of shit together. That's not how I work. It's not how we advise members of the forum to work. It's not what we do. They say, what's a good source? What makes a good source? And we've talked about what makes a good source. And Geneza is that kind of company. Long time, plenty of history, great quality control, good looking products, products that work, products that our members have tried. That's what we want from any good source. And then ultimately, of course, it comes down to, as you just said, Steve, you run the products yourself. You've actually tried and tested the product yourself, and you can come back to that ultimate experience, which is your own personal experience, to say, I've used their product, I like their product, I got great results in their product. And then you are literally able to, hand on heart, with your reputation, meaning everything, go out there and say to someone who gets in touch with you, is Geneza a great source? And you go, fucking right, it's a great source. I've used it and I've got great results. And I can point you to other people that have done exactly the same as me. No bullshit, no made up fucking reviews. The real deal, Steve. That's all that matters, really, at the end of the day. Back to you.
Yeah, and here's the bottom line. I'm going to explain to you, a lot of you are listening, you never run Tren before, and that's fine. You don't have to have ran Tren to be curious about it, want to learn more about it. So I respect that. Before I ran Tren, I would do my homework. I did my homework on it. I read a lot of stuff on it. I asked people who have tried it before. I kind of had an idea of what I was expecting going in. And when you run Tren, really the danger of running bad Tren is that you can really give yourself a lot of toxicity that is unnecessary. So is Tren going to be a steroid that's going to give you a lot of side effects? Yes. Nobody is denying that. But you can make it where it's not going to be as bad. The side effects can be limited, and you can also save yourself money because you don't have to run as much to get really, really good results when you're running quality Tren. So unfortunately, just looking at the vial is not going to tell you if it's quality Tren. A lot of people have a theory. If you look at the Tren and it's a certain rusty color, it's going to be good Tren, yada, yada, yada. No, it has nothing to do. The color doesn't mean shit, okay? You have to trust the brand you're getting. You have to trust the source you're getting it from to provide you good quality gear. So that's what Geneza Pharma is all about. This is why we love Geneza Pharma, because you're getting quality gear. When you extract that oil out, you load that syringe, and you're about to plunge that Tren in your body, you're getting good quality. You know that you have less of a chance of getting side effects that are preventable. Tren cough, for example. Dirty Tren can give you Tren cough on every injection. Now, I'm not saying if you take Geneza, you're not going to get Tren cough, because it can still happen. But we want to reduce the likelihood of Tren cough as much as we can. So Geneza is going to be the one for that. So, Mobster, anything to add to that? And then we're going to start getting into some Tren options from Geneza.
I think what Steve just said is, back in the old days, guys, we didn't have these lab tests. We didn't have certificates of analysis. I mean, honestly, Steve, I've been around long enough that forums like ours actually used to go off and do that. They would get a group of guys who chipped $50 or $100 in, and they would test products that way, because the labs that we were using then didn't have that. So what did we have? We had exactly what Steve said. We were literally comparing the colors, or the crystallization, or the lack of crystallization. That's about as sophisticated as it got. And we had no choice. But now we have a choice. Now we almost demand that the companies have lab tests, and demand that they have the certificates of analysis. And if they don't, then we can go elsewhere, because I can find a product that looks the same, costs the same, but doesn't have those things. I want those things. Listen, guys, if I go to the supermarket, I've actually looked at this, Steve. The supermarkets have a better standard of being able to follow the product from the field to the tin to the shelf. And there's actually a thing in the United Kingdom here where you can do that. Literally every single part of that is box ticked and text tested all the way through. It's better than what's called ISO or ISA 9001. That's the kind of stuff that we're asking and demanding of our UGLs and our pharmaceutical PEDs, like we're talking about with Geneza. And that's what Geneza offers us, because that's what the market expects. If you don't get it, go somewhere else. Come to Geneza. Back to you, Steve.
All right, so next one we're going to talk about. Let's get into the options for Tren. So first one, really quick, GP oral Tren, and it's really good that Geneza Pharma has this option, because look, and I have friends like this, not all of you can use injectables. All right. Now, we can have an argument on the forums. We do it all the time, where guys say you can't run orals, blah, 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 blah. You can't run orals. You got to run injectables, blah, blah, blah. It's just not true. I know people, they've been using steroids for 20, 30 years who've never used injectables. Why? Some of them have a needle phobia. And I respect that. Some people are scared of things. Some people are scared of the ocean. Some people are scared of spiders. Some people are scared of the dark. All right. It happens. Okay. We're human. A lot of you have phobias. Some of you are afraid of heights. So I'm never going to force someone to do something they don't want to do. That's a dickish thing to do. So that's why I kind of don't like that when you see that on the forums. People are like, oh, you got to run an injectable. You don't. So I like that Geneza Pharma, they have an oral Tren option. Now, is oral Tren going to be as effective as injectable Tren? No, it's not. All right. It's just like comparing oral testosterone, which is andriol, to injectable testosterone. Andriol is not going to be as absorbed in the body as injecting testosterone. That's true, but it doesn't mean you can't use it. Okay. And some doctors prescribe andriol for their patients. Okay. Not because it doesn't work. Well, because some of their patients don't want to use injections. So I respect that. Okay. So in this case, Geneza Pharma has an oral option. So Mobster touched on that.
Yeah, I was just going to say something real simple here, guys. I mean, the obvious thing that Steve said is exactly right. In fact, we've actually had members on the forum that have freaked out, meaning proper full-on anxiety attacks when they're giving themselves an injection. And this is the same as if they've gone to the doctors and have a jab. They just get real uncomfortable and anxious. The other issue is, Steve, is the amount. In order for you sometimes to take the amount as in an oral form, as you would in an injectable form, can be a factor of a minimum, Steve, of 3 to 5, and sometimes 10. I would not want, and I'm not using Tren here as an example, but I wouldn't want to take 500 milligrams of an oral, even if the half-life was spot on the same and lasted the same amount of time in my body, and took the same amount of time to absorb and reach peak levels, etc., etc. It's just, honestly, it'd be 10 tablets versus half a mil or a mil or 2 mils or something like that. That takes a few seconds. And as Steve said, then we know that there's an argument to be made in terms of effectivity, in terms of the amount that goes into the body and does what we want it to do. I find sometimes, Steve, especially if you've got a training partner or a buddy or sexual partner or whatever else that you're comfortable with, it's easier sometimes to have them do the injection for you than it is to do for yourself if you struggle with that anxiety. But like Steve says, the great thing here is that there are options. There aren't just oral options, like Steve said, but there are ester options. So I like the simple fact that they cover you right across the spectrum, all the different extras and all the different ways that you can possibly take it, Steve.
Yeah, and also like I dated a nurse, okay, and she had a daughter, 5 years old, and you know, and she just didn't want needles around the house. She didn't mind if I used steroids, but she's like, "Look, I don't want you to have needles around the house." And I respected that, so I just did oral steroids, you know. And you're sharing a house with someone, they don't want needles. You can't, what are you gonna do? Hide them, And then they find the needles, or your kid finds the needles. So look, I respect that. So Geneza Pharma, they're for everybody. That's what I like about them. They don't just have one type of Tren. They have 5 types of Tren. They have Tren mixes. They have different esters. So the oral Tren, very simple, comes in a pack, 100 tabs, 250 micrograms. And, the dosage, you're going to take three or four tabs a day. Okay. And that's how you would dose it. And you can, stack it with an injectable if you want. So you're going to, take up to 1,000 micrograms is the absolute max. Some guys only take two pills. So it would be 500 micrograms. So, and that's it. And it's really simple. It's 6 weeks. You can use it solo. You don't have to worry about injecting or anything. So I wouldn't stack with another oral. You don't have to. But that's the way you'd run the oral Tren, and it's not expensive. You can buy a pack of it from Geneza for very cheap. So it can get expensive though. The longer you run it, it can get expensive. I'm trying to do the math. Let's say you take 4 tabs, 100 divided by 100, so 25 days. So if you take 4 tabs a day, 1 pack will last you 25 days, about almost a month. So if you wanted to take it for 8 weeks, you'd have to get 2 tabs. So it really isn't that expensive. It's not as cheap as D-Bowl, but it's not expensive at all. But most of you are going to run injectables. I didn't want to spend too much time talking about oral Tren. So let's get into the injectables, Mobster. And the most common injectable used in bodybuilding, in competing, is going to be Trenbolone acetate. And the reason is it's flexible. It's in your system quick. It's out of your system quick. So comes in 100 milligram a milliliter, 10 milliliter vials. And look, the dosage and Tren, we can argue about this one for many podcasts. But look, you can use Tren as low as 150, 200 milligrams, as high as 350, which is the average dose, as high as 400. Now, professional, some of the guys on the forum, Monstro, Body Monster, these are big bodybuilders. These are big dudes. And they've run a lot of steroids and they've abused steroids. So for them, They jack up the dose, 500 milligrams, 750, 1,000. You know, they're the alphas. You know what I'm saying? They run it hard. You know what I'm saying? So, but you don't have to run it that hard to be an alpha. You can be an alpha on Tren at 200 milligrams. Me personally, I like 250. I always get good results on 250. I don't need more. If you go from 250 to 300, 300 to 350, you'll notice the side effects start having a domino effect. And we're going to get into the side effects later on the show. I want to kind of keep things organized. But Tren, acetate, shorter ester, you want to try to inject it every other day. 3-4 times a week would be acceptable with it. Absolutely. Some people say, oh, can I do it 3 times a week? Yes. Okay, you'll be fine doing Tren Ace 3 times a week. I've done it that way. The nice thing about it, Mobster, if you only do it 6 weeks, you come off of it, it only takes a couple weeks for most of it to be out of your system. So if the side effects get too bad, you can always stop it after 6 weeks. So keep it flexible. Maybe you just want to go 5 weeks. I don't know. But you can be flexible with Tren Ace. It's going to kick in like a ton of bricks within the first week or two. And then from there, it just multiplies. So the flexibility of Tren Ace is the big draw and why it's the most popular selling Tren. Mobster, go ahead before we move on to the next one.
Yeah, just a couple of thoughts here, Steve. Number one, and this is mostly because, of course, while we talk about people like Monster and Body Monster being, they do real well on it, and that's another reason why they like it. And then because they're set up that they physically and physiologically, Steve, to cope well with it, they run higher dosages and get great effects from it. But our typical listener, I would recommend, as Steve's already touched upon, around 300. The outlier, Steve, would probably be as high as 700 milligrams. So somewhere in there. If I was going to run Tren Ace, I would say 300 milligrams a week. And like Steve says, and this is one of those obvious words of advice, because you want to see how you're going to get on with Tren, especially the first time you do it. And you don't want to have to go off and change and muck around and restart a cycle or whatever else. So it's something that's in quickly and out quickly is another reason why Tren Ace is so popular. Because if you hate how you feel on it, if you don't manage the side effects well, then as Steve said, it's out of your system real quick. Now, once you realize that you cope well with Tren, once you realize that you're okay with 300, 400 milligrams, whatever that we're talking about, then you can try other versions because they're longer in your system, they take longer to come out, they're slower acting, and you know that it's not going to be an issue. Something that comes out of your system or feels like it's come out of your system in a couple of days versus something that you're going to have to struggle with for a week. That's the kind of sort of tips that we're looking at here. So I would always talk about running something like Tren Ace early. That would probably be my first choice for those reasons, just to see how I handle it, just to see how I feel on it. I mean, Tren, for example, as awesome a steroid as it is, really isn't for everybody, just in terms of, say, the mental effects, never mind the physical. And we're going to get into all of that after we've talked about the various esters that are available. But again, it's not for everybody. So you want a shorter acting version first, just to see how you manage, just to see how you cope. Steve's used an analogy in other podcasts and Jen before when he talks about it being an issue for some people when you're in a relationship, because you basically want to shag everything else that's nearby, and there's a real problem. So again, something like that, you might say, I don't like it, Steve. Then there are other options that Geneza offers, but you want a short acting, fast in, fast out ester, almost certainly, Steve, as your first choice for Tren before you start looking at the other esters. That's probably why it's so popular, especially for all the newbies to Tren. Back to you, Steve.
All right, so next one, I think naturally, Mobster, the next one we should talk about is Tren E. Now, Tren enanthate, those of you know who you've run other steroids before, the enanthate ester, very simple. With Geneza, they have 10 milliliter, and it's 200 milligrams a milliliter. Now, this one is the second most popular, very close to Tren Ace. The reason people like Tren E is you only have to inject it once or twice a week, number one. Number two, you're getting 200 milligrams per milliliter. So if you want to run 400 milligrams a week, you just need to do 2 cc's a week. You're done. That's it. Inject it twice a week, Monday, Thursday, whatever, or Tuesday, Friday, whatever you want to do it, and you're done. You don't gotta inject much Tren, much cc's, and it's going to give you a lot of Tren per cc. Now the Tren Ace was only 100 milligrams in a liter, you see? But a lot of people like the flexibility of doing it that way because they can move the dosages around, they can cut it off early. Now Tren E, it's going to hit you like a ton of bricks. Now, in my experience, now maybe come on the forums, come on social, tell me your experiences. I'm curious to hear more from you guys of your experiences. But in my experience, Tren Ace and Tren E both hit you like a ton of bricks after a couple weeks on it. But the difference for me is Tren E will take longer to be out of your system. So those annoying side effects that we're going to get into later in this podcast are going to stick around even after you stop using Tren E for longer than a week or two, as they would in Tren Ace. So if you're looking for something that's more flexible, that you can start, stop, go up, a lot of professional bodybuilders want that flexibility because they worry about side effects as they get closer to the competition. They worry about unforeseen events happening. So they want that flexibility to be able to stop using a particular steroid and have it be out of their system quicker. So that's the advantage of using a shorter ester. But with the E, as I said, you don't have to inject it as much, and you can inject less and get double the amount. So it's a no-brainer. But Tren E, GP Tren E, great product, very, very popular. I think for those of you who have experience with Tren Ace, then and you've kind of got used to the side effects, you know how to handle them, you can graduate to the Tren E and start and see if you like the Tren E better. But again, they're both the same thing. They're both Tren. So Mobster, touch on that a little bit.
I'm just thinking, Steve, about stacking here for a second. So dosage, like Steve said, will probably be about a mil and a half, as he says, twice a week. So that would be 300 milligrams for a total of 600 milligrams a week. Again, that's for those of you that can handle that level of trend. And regardless of the ester, I would again recommend, I don't like the pyramid up and down, Steve. And I used to think it was a big deal and actually had a lot of thought behind it back in the day. But in reality, guys, pyramid is kind of pointless. Once you're on, and you're suppressing your natural testosterone. So it seems pointless to build up in the system unless the results are somehow different, which they're not. So I would probably look here a mil and a half twice a week, exactly like Steve says. I'm looking here, Steve, just funny enough, as a suggestion and a great, this is just other products that you can add once you know that you handle Tren okay. And that would be probably as a cutting stack here, Steve, test propionate and winstrol together. And again, this will be dependent on how you handle those other drugs as well. Winstrol, for example, can cause problems, as we know. But again, it would be that sort of combination of the Tren E, the testosterone propionate, and the winstrol together. That would be an absolutely amazing cutting stack, guys. I mean, when we're talking about the side effects, as we will in a little while, I'm also thinking of the simple fact of the title here, Steve, which is a summer cutter. Why do we summer cut? Because we want to look amazing on the beach. We want to look amazing as we're wearing less clothes as the heat gets hotter. We're in shorts, we're in t-shirts, we end up in vests. We want our muscles to pop. But Tren can make you hot and sweaty, guys. So my recommendation ahead of when we do the other stuff, Steve, is try to do this before the proper heat of the summer comes. And like I said, we'll talk about the other side effects here. But then Tren E for me would be one if you've got some experience and know how you get on it. One of my recommendations of this kind of thing would be to run something ahead of time just to see how I manage it, and then run it in with the case of you as the cycle I've just suggested later on when I got experience, when I know that I can handle it, and then have got those two additional Geneza products that are just going to absolutely smash the granny out of my fat journey and just add to the results that I want at the end of the stack, Steve. So that's just two quick suggestions on the amounts and on something to stack it with before we talk about the next tester.
Yeah, and Tren, look, like I said at the beginning, some of you are going to run Tren and you're going to be amazed at the results you get. Like you're going to run it even if your diet's shit, which I never recommend you have a shitty diet. But some of you, you know, you'll still, even on a shitty diet, shred up like crazy. So, I mean, this is the one. Like if you really put in, you know, put everything in and you're really taking the next level, Tren is definitely the one. So let's get to the next one. We'll kind of get into that later too. So we talked about oral Tren, we talked about Tren Ace, we talked about Tren E. So next one we're going to talk about is going to be one that's called GP Tren 150. So this one is a mix of 3 different trends: Trenbolone acetate, Trenbolone enanthate, and Trenbolone Hex. Now, these are a little, see, I've always viewed Trenbolone Hex as kind of in between ACE and E when it comes to esters. So you're getting 3 different esters that are 3 different lengths. You're getting a short ester, an intermediate ester, and a longer ester. So with this one, you can inject 3 times a week. Now, for some reason, many of you out there swear that when you stack in different esters, you get better results. You feel more of an effect. I don't know what it is. Same thing with Sustanon. Sustanon is a blend of 4 testosterone esters typically. Some Sustanons are different. They have 5 esters, for example. But the true Sustanon has 4 esters. And some of you like Sustanon better than just straight testosterone with 1 ester. I don't know. So I personally have run Tren, I've run Tren Hex, I've run Tren E, I've run Tren Ace. Look, they all hit you like a ton of bricks. They all give you an amazing results. So in my view, I don't really see the difference with some of you. I don't know if it's a psychological thing or what, but many people love this Tren because each milliliter is 150 milligrams. So again, it's right in the middle of the ACE and E. The ACE was 100, the E is 200. So this is 150. So some of you like that. I don't know what it is. Some of my clients like insist, like, I want 150 milligrams a milliliter. I'm like, dude, why don't you just get 100 or 200 or 250? Why do you need 150? Like, oh, I just like 150. I like 150 because I run 2 cc's a week, and that's 300 milligrams. That's perfect for me. Boom, there you go. So in this one, you can do it that way. You know, so a lot of people like that. If you want to run 450, you do 3 cc's 3 times a week and spread it out, and you get 450 a week. Or you can do 1 cc like every 4 days or every 3 days, and it would kind of just space itself out. So I don't know what it is. Some guys really, really like doing it this way, Mob. So I don't know what it is, but in this case, you have the flexibility, go 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 10 weeks, 12 weeks, however much you can tolerate. But Tren is a fantastic steroid, no matter which one you use.
Yeah, let me just jump in here for a second here, Steve. I think, this might be bro science, it has to be said, and that's probably because there's not enough studies using Tren and specifically Tren to enable me to back this up with solid-ass information. I wish I could, guys, because we would definitely include it. So here's the thing, and it's like Steve says, you could argue that this also applies to SUS and any other product where there's multiple different esters, short, medium, and long in the product. So there's an argument here to be made, Steve, and especially when it comes to the side effects again, of a consistent and level blood supply. One of the issues, and again, this is the logic, if not the actual science, because I wish it was, which says the up and down, that's the raising and lowering of the testosterone in your blood, and specifically here of the Tren in your blood and in your muscles, in your body, that's where you're going to get that sort of feeling great, feeling shit, feeling hot, feeling cold. Basically, guys, me and Steve have had these off-air discussions multiple times. We are so fucking hormonal, men and women. And when we feel shit, it's either our immune system suppressed or our hormone levels are out of skew. And when we feel great, it's when our immune system's fucking kicking ass, or our hormone levels are as good as they're supposed to be. Now, here we are injecting a hormone, testosterone, in its various forms. And so what happens, some people, and again, it completely depends on the individual, Steve, you feel amazing, like you're going to take over the planet, kick ass and shag everything with a pulse. And that's because your testosterone levels are high. And the others is when they come off. Hell, Steve, I'm struggling with the energy now as I'm doing a PCT, where, the kick, that extra oomph that you have on a daily basis disappears. Tren is notorious for the sensation of the up and down of the hormones. And again, that specifically depends on the ester. So here's where something like Tren 150 probably smooths that out, because as the short-acting ester disappears, you've still got the medium and longer-acting esters in there. It's just a theory, Steve. See what you think.
Look, at the end of the day, you guys have to experiment with these steroids yourself and decide. Like, at the end of the day, and your body's changed too, so you have to remember that. So you can't say, well, I ran it this way and I had a really, really good results. And this other time I ran it this way. Well, the second time I ran, I was going through a divorce. I wasn't eating good. I wasn't training. My mind wasn't on training. I go to the gym, my mind would be on something
Overweight,
else. Yeah,
fat,
I have the
diabetes.
phone next to me while I'm training, waiting for the lawyer to text me news, about it's like you're distracted, you can't really focus. So your body changes over time. My best cycles, were always cycles I could just focus 100% on the cycle. I didn't have any other distractions and everything. Everything was level in my life. That's how I like to keep it. So it really, really just depends on your situation. So experiment, why not try these? I like to experiment. I've used all of this shit because I have experimented with it, so that's how it is. So next one, let's get to the next one, Mobster. We got one more to talk about, believe it or not. And that's GP Andro Mix. And this is a very, very popular of all the trend mixes. This one on Geneza is really their number one seller, I think, among trend options. And this one is testosterone prop, trenbolone acetate, and drostanolone propionate, which is Masteron. And these are all short esters. So you got test, trend, mast, short esters. Great for physique competitors. You can really run this leading up to your competition. It's a good synergy. It's 50 milligrams of each, and it's 150 milligrams per milliliter total. So with this one, same thing. Run it like the Tri-Trend. Well, actually, no, you don't want to run it like the Tri-Trend because it's shorter esters in the Tri-Trend. The Tri-Trend, remember, has a short, intermediate, and long. But what I mean by that is 150 milligrams. So you run it like that in terms of how much you're taking per week, but you want to dose this every other day or even every day. So in this one is a little tricky because 1 cc is going to be 150 milligrams. So how do you dose it? If you do it every other day, that's a lot, of gear. But you remember, it's only a third of each. So if you do the math and you're doing it every other day, that's 3.5. So you're getting, if you do it every day, you're going to get 7 times that. So you're getting 350 of test probe, 350 of trend ace, and 350 of Masteron propionate. If you do it every other day, you're getting half of that. So getting a little bit under about 175 milligrams a week. So I think that would be a little low. So on this one, you might want to just go ahead and do every day 1 cc. So that is a lot of injections. To inject every day, 7 days a week, 30 times a month, that's going to get old quick. In my mind,
let me jump in here, Steve. This is what I would do because, like Steve says, and this literally comes down to personal experience. So we're going to give you more than one option. I would run it 3 times a week. Cost-wise, effectiveness-wise, I think it compares really well with other options. But here's what I would do, Steve, because it's 150 ml. I would inject 1 ml 3 times a week for 450 milligrams total, and that to me would be absolutely perfect. And again, someone like Monstro, Body Monster, etc., might want to run it a little bit higher. So they might go 1.5 mil to 2 mil 3 times a week and get up to the numbers that Steve's talking about. So that would be perfect for me, Steve. I think 450 milligrams, if I knew I could handle trend really well with these multiple esters. And this is super important here, like Steve's already said, the difference between this and the other product is the Masteron. So I think, like Steve said, super competition useful versus, say, for example, a summer cut. But again, guys, here's another idea. You run a different option for the first part of the cycle. And again, it could be something that's got more than one ester in. And then this at the end of the cycle, Steve, when stuff is already popping, because as we said on other podcasts when we talked about Masteron, we don't recommend Masteron for the most part, especially in a cutting stack, if you're fat. And I mean, you cannot see the muscles. And it's the difference between being relatively lean and abs popping. It's the difference between 12% and 8% body fat, guys. So Masteron works super well in hardening up the muscles when you can fucking see the muscles. So for me, Steve, as you said already, definitely a great choice for those who compete on stage, whether they're physique or classic or open class or whatever. They want their muscles to be hard. They want to be ripped. They want to be kicking the other guy's ass. But equally, as I said, something that if you're already kind of lean and you get leaner and you want that last edge over and above anybody else you're going to see on the beach or down at the park, wherever you're letting everybody see those muscles that you've got, this to me would be a great finisher. But again, super a number one choice, I think, competitively. Number two choice for those of you that want that extra edge to what you're already doing. But you must, and we will get into this, you must make sure that everything else is on point. Otherwise, I don't want you using this and being fat. And I don't want you using this and having a poor diet, because this is the one that's going to add that shine, that polish to what you've already done, because you've got everything else on point, Steve. And like I said, the Mastodon, there are many fans of Mastodon out there, love it. But you look, guys, you go off and look at those people's logs, look at the members' profiles, and you will see that the Mastodon lovers tend to be already lean. That's super important. So yeah, a great product here, Steve. I like the ratios, I like the dosage, and I think for me, the 450 milligram free single 1 mil jabs per week would be absolutely on point. Guys, there's something else you can do, and I've talked about this in the past. It's completely different. Don't get stuck on the whole 7 days a week thing. Just like Steve says, every day, every other day, every third day, whatever, when it comes to injection. The ester for me is everything when it comes to the frequency of injections. So, for example, I could see me running this, Steve, on an every other day, which would be 3 times 1 week and 4 times the next week. It's just that consistent blood levels, great results if I'm doing everything else like I'm supposed to do. And it would mean I'd be slightly over 450 milligrams 1 week and just about 450 milligrams on the shorter week. Perfect for me, Steve, and I think that's be probably the way that I would run this particular ester. Back to you.
So let's talk about some steroids that are really good for cutting for the summer that GP has. So right off the bat, I'm going to give you 2 orals that you can run with Tren, that I run with Tren. And it's great for cutting. It's great for hardening. Anavar. So with the Anavar, again, you're running anywhere from 200 to 400 milligrams of Tren. That's the average dose. And then I would do 40 to 60 milligrams a day of the Anavar. And GP has a great Anavar. You don't have to worry about it being fake. You don't have to worry about it being underdosed. Great quality Anavar. I absolutely love it. They also have Trenbolone, GP T-Bol. And I absolutely love Trenbolone as well, Mobster. If you're looking for something with low side effects and something that's not going to add to side effects of the Tren, I really like using T-Bol with it. It's a really good one. It's going to boost your strength, but it's also going to help you cut down if that's your goals with Tren. And it's not going to interfere with your cutting with Tren. It's not going to increase your appetite. It's not going to do anything like that. So I really like those 2 Mobster, Anavar and T-Bol with Tren. And then the T-Bol, same thing, similar dose. I go maybe a touch lower on the T-Bol, 30 to 50 milligrams on the T-Bol. I've gone as low as 30, 40 on T-Bol with Tren, and I've gotten fantastic results for cutting. So you really shred up well on that stack. I really like it. What are a couple steroids that you think would be good with Tren for cutting?
I mean, I agree with you 100% on the Anavar, Steve. As you know, I'm a big fan of it. And again, I'd actually keep it on the low side, purely and simply because I hate the shin bumps and I'd be struggling. I think myself, arguably, possibly with the Tren side effects. And I say that specifically because as a strength athlete, I tend towards the higher body fat and the bigger body mass guys. And I know, as I've said this on other podcasts, lots and lots of my strength buddies have run Tren, absolutely loved it for strength as well as Anavar, but suffered badly with the side effects because they're carrying such a high level of body fat. Winstrol, Steve, or injectable. Again, only issue is, and I think it would especially apply as I dried out and got into the summer shape that I'd want to, that I think the side effects for Winstrol can be added to the leaner you get, whether that's with dry joints or whether that's with hair loss or whatever, guys. So again, I'm always going to be a low dose kind of guy. I think Steve is as well. Zero need to run that at higher dosages. And again, especially guys, and this is something else like I touched upon earlier, if I was competing and I was doing different bits and pieces, one of my recommendations has always been to run products that I'm not familiar with ahead of the competition. And what do I mean by that? Don't leave it to the last couple of weeks before the competition goes. Run it maybe at the beginning of the competition cycle or out of season, just to see how you feel on it, just to see how you manage and mitigate the side effects. We'll give you some tips, of course, but this is one of those mobster tips, and I think Stevesmi tips in terms of getting to know how you run the drug. Like Steve says, and it's super important when we're talking about whether it's cutting, whether any Geneza product, but specifically with Tren. Steve touched on it earlier, and I think it applies to any stack that we talk about here, Steve. the condition you are in when you start that stack. And by condition, I mean both body fat and cardiovascular. And like Steve said already, as a great example, Steve, I wouldn't recommend Tren of any kind for older athletes. I think the younger to middle age is fine. The older athletes tend to struggle even more, I think, and that's as much mental as it is physical. Steve just reminded me, GP Masteron on its own, and don't forget, we've just said it's actually in one of the blends there, Steve. Definitely something I could see hardening up an athlete. Again, I would want you to be around the 12% when you're thinking of adding Masteron into any stack. Never mind the summer cutting stack, and never mind specifically a Geneza Pharma and Trenbolone stack. But if you are, and if your conditioning cardio and your diet is on point, as the body fat starts to drop and the muscles start to pop, Masteron will work its magic. What sort of dosage could you see someone using if we were talking about Masteron, Steve?
Yeah, so with Tren, I would do anywhere from 300 to 500 of Masteron. And then the GP has Masteron 100, which is the shorter ester, and GP Mass 200, which is the enanthate ester. So if you're running the short ester of Tren, you can mix in the Masteron in the same syringe, or you could do with the long ester if you're using the long ester Tren. That's what usually people do. There's no rule where you have to run long ester Tren with long ester Mass, or you can do it any way you want. So that's what usually guys do. So I think it's a really good stack. Another good one to stack with Tren, and this is going to be a shocker to a lot of you, is equipoise, and it's called GP Bold 300, as in boldenone. And the reason I like EQ with Tren is it's something else to add to Tren that's not going to give you a lot of side effects. And the same thing with Primobolan. You can use the GP Primobolan. I think that's a good one with Tren as well, because both of those don't increase your side effects, and they're good for cutting. There's a really good GP Prima 100, which is 100 milligrams a milliliter. It really stacks good with Tren if you don't want excess side effects. Another one too, GP Proviron, if you don't want side effects. It stacks good with Tren. It's a little on the pricey side, but Proviron is a really good one. You can use a Tren, and these are the ones that guys like to stack. So if you're using Equipoise or Primobolan, I would go 400, 500, even 600 milligrams. You could jack up the dose on those and then run Tren at half that dose. So if you're doing 600 of one, do 300 of the Tren. Proviron, you only have to run 25 milligrams. Some people run 50, but Proviron is very little to no side effects. You can stack it with Tren very well. So I think those are really, really good options you can use for Tren for cutting for the summer. And then the one more mobster, maybe you could touch on a little bit, Winstrol. Talk about Winstrol for cutting with Tren. What do you think about that one?
That was the thing for me when, in terms of, funny enough, running it with the Tren in terms of the Tren type side effects, they wouldn't be an issue. But it's one of those ones where I think it's definitely, if you are one of the listeners, and there's plenty of you out there, I'm going to say about 10% of the listeners absolutely freak over the potential for hair loss. Winstrol's the one that's right up there for you guys. So for me, I'm a shaving bitch. Just say they cut that hair right down. I don't care. So I wouldn't worry about that at all. And definitely something that is a great cutter / dryer, Steve, in terms of getting people into shape. Again, guys, and we will bang this hammer in a minute and make sure that you're well aware of what you need to do outside of what you're injecting and what performance enhancing drugs you're using, regardless of source. It is super, super important when it comes to getting in shape. But Winstrol will aid that as well as the Tren. Here's the thing, Steve, and I think it's something that you and I have said before. When it comes to Tren, and specifically Geneza Pharma Tren, some people, I'll quote what's said. They say Tren is God. Tren is gold. And these are kind of euphemisms and slightly tongue-in-cheek. But the truth of the matter is, some people absolutely fucking love it. And if they're set up physically, biologically, physiologically to do well on Tren, then it's the best thing they've ever fucking had. And sometimes it's almost a sad day when they have to take a step back and go to something else. It's a sign of their age. It's a sign of the change in their life. It's a sign that their priorities have shifted. And they're almost like, I have to give up the sports car, Steve, and buy an SUV because I've got kids. Tren's kind of like that for some people because they feel fucking godlike, walking around like they own the planet, and they know they look good. They know they feel good. They know they're smashing the stuff in the gym when it's held up and for them compared to other drugs. So for me, when you're adding in anything else, including Winstrol, it has to, there's a yin and a yang that Steve and I talk about, a synergy sometimes. Does it add to or does it take away? So the drugs that we're suggesting, including Winstrol, are adding to. You're already going to feel, if you're set up that way, great on the trend. If you're not set up that way, you're going to hate it. So we will touch on that, obviously. But if you are set up to handle it, and then you add, I would say, a low dose again for me, even if I was running the trend high, just to get that extra shine, the extra pop. Masteron for the hardness, Winstrol for the dryness, Steve. The only issue, again, and there are ways of mitigating that, of course, would be the dryness around the joints, the potential for hair loss, etc., which is another reason why I'd recommend lowering the dose, perhaps compared to what we would do. Some drugs, Steve, we talk about, and it's an equal amount. With Winstrol here, I would be a much lower dose than the trend, but that would be my personal preference based on, I think, looking at my strength buddies and the experiences they've had with trend, and then the idea of adding anything else in and seeing how that runs. What about you, Steve, in terms of what you would do with it for dosage?
Yeah, so Winstrol, you got to be really careful. Now, again, with Winstrol, I've seen a huge spread between people who run Winstrol with Tren and have really, really good results. They love it, they shred up, and other people, which are on my end of the spectrum, which have extremely horrible side effects, headaches, loss of head hair, prostate enlargement, all these stuff, the things that I experienced on Winstrol with Tren. So some of you are going to react really poorly to it. So I much rather use Masteron with Tren, but some of you are going to have great results on Tren with Winstrol. So, but I would not run more than 25 milligrams of the Winstrol to start, just to see how you react. Then you can go from there. So those are really, really good cutting options, Mobster. I think I think we've pretty much covered it all when it comes to that. So why don't we talk a little bit about training, cardio, and diet for a little bit, and then we'll kind of talk about side effects. Go ahead.
And the side effects, yeah. So, guys, super, super important. And this is I'm going to bang this drum loud and proud. I say this all the time. If you want the absolute best possible results you're ever going to get from a stack, from a cycle, including any that we recommend, heck, guys, anybody recommends, you need to have, and especially applies to any trend, cycle, and or stack. You need to have, for example, with trend, your cardio on point. Why? Because the trend fucks with a lot of people's cardio. So I want you to have your cardio point before the stack and to try it and do as well as you can during, not only just for conditioning purposes, in other words, so that you're able to train and do the daily stuff that you would normally do, which might well include some sort of physical work or office work or whatever, but also because it will add to your fat loss and it will add to your cut for summer, like we're talking about today. So that's super important, number one. Number two, diet. Guys, again, Steve touched on this earlier on, and I'll bring Steve in very quick because we're going to talk about side effects shortly. A lot of guys can take Tren and get great results even with a shitty diet. But here's the thing, it's like, for me, that's kind of half-assed. You know that you've got good results with the Tren because you had a shitty diet. Why should I diet? Because the fucking results would have been that much better and you'd have popped more and you'd be that much leaner had your diet been on point. So you'd have had good results. No, you'd have had amazing results. It's that important, Steve. What do you think on that before we talk about side effects?
Yeah, and side effects tie into this because if your diet's crap before, and then you run Tren and you suddenly, I'm going to do a clean diet while I'm on Tren. It doesn't work like that. Your body's going to want all those crappy foods that you're used to. If you're used to eating shit every day, your body's going to want that. It's an addiction. These refined oils, these refined sugars, these sweets, all these refined flour, breads, and all this stuff. You're going to want that when you're on Tren too. So it's not the time to clean up your diet. You need to clean up your diet before. How do you combat size? Mobster explained it. Go into cycle and top shape. If you can't run a mile in 8 minutes, I don't care how old you are, then you're not ready. You're not ready for tren. I mean, 8-minute mile is nothing. We ran that in middle school for PE. Okay. And if you couldn't even do it in 8 minutes, you get made fun of. Like those are the kids that would fake having asthma to get out of PE class that day. The kids who couldn't run in 8 minutes. I mean, come on. You could have the worst genetics in the world. It's not that hard to do. So if you can't even run a mile in 8 minutes, I mean, come on. Should you be using tren? Probably not. But like, it just get in better shape. You got to have good heart health. Your blood pressure's got to be good. Your cholesterol's got to be good already. You can't just run tren and expect all that to fall into place. It's not going to happen. It's not the time to take tren and be like, yeah, I'm going to clean up my act and get in good shape on tren, because it's not going to happen. So that's the number one way to combat side effects. Now, side effects during the summer, it is hot, mobster, in America. I know in Britain, you've had some really bad hot heat waves the past few years, and it's going to get worse.
It's hot right now, Steve.
Yeah.
I'm sweating right now.
Well, we were going to do this podcast this morning, and I had the message Mobster, I can't make our podcast. Why? Because I got the AC guy coming. So basically, we are living in a climate, and that it's hot during the summer, and you want to cut during the summer. So what do you do to combat that? You make sure your air conditioner's running good. You make sure you got a nice dual current quiet fan in your room. You can go on Amazon and buy a dual current fan, or you can go to a supply store, whatever, buy it online, a dual current fan that's quiet. That's not going to keep you up at night. Sleep with less clothes as you can. Naked, okay, sleep naked. Who cares? I mean, if you want to sleep just in your underwear, great. I mean, not the time to wear pajamas while you're on tren, because your pajamas are going to be soaked in the morning. Not the time to use a blanket when you're on tren, because the blanket's going to be soaked. Your pillow's going to be soaked. Make sure you keep a good cold environment that you sleep in. Make sure that you are cooling yourself out. Maybe a hot shower a couple times a day to really clean yourself up. Make sure you stay hydrated on tren. You'll notice when you're on tren, you're pissing out brown stuff. Now, it's the metabolites coming out of your body. Yes, I get that part, but it's also the toxicity that tren is being caused. So you want to make sure you run your liver support supplements. Come on the forum. We have great liver support supplement, all in one product that you can use. Make sure that you're drinking a lot of water, flush that, consistently flush that out, not dehydrating yourself. And you got to learn about electrolytes. If you're sweating while you're on tren, you got to get your electrolytes back. So one of the tips I'll give you before I bring in Mobster to talk a little bit about training is you can add a pinch of salt and a pinch of cream of tartar to your water. And that will give you a natural electrolyte that will basically help hydrate you better. Because when you sweat, you're sweating out those minerals and you're sweating out the salt. So getting it back is important, especially on tren. But on tren, if you get sick, you start throwing up, or you get food poisoning on tren, you are fucked. All right. I once did a fishing trip while on tren. It was an 8-hour fishing trip. I spent 7 hours throwing up, diarrhea, because I got seasick. By the time I got out of there, I needed like I needed to be like, I was like, just throw me overboard and feed me to the sharks. That's how horrible it was. So it's not the time to be on tren when you're going to put yourself in any type of harm of it going out one way or the other. Okay. You want to make sure you stay consistent with your diet. You drink plenty of water, and you don't give yourself food poisoning or get yourself seasick or go on a plane where you get air sick or anything like that. Not the time to travel while you're on tren. You want to be in a stable environment, a cool environment, and stay cool. All right. I've had to quit gyms in the past because they didn't keep it cool enough in the gym while I was on tren. It was ungodly hot in the gym. I had to quit. So you want to make sure your gym has an air conditioner, because if they don't, and we have a heat wave and where it's 100 degrees outside, you're screwed on tren. So make sure. One of the tips I have to cool down, you'll learn this trick if you live in a hot climate and your air conditioner breaks, is soak your shirt, soak your shorts, and put that on. And that will keep you cool throughout the day. And make sure when you're outside in the sun, wear a hat. Because that's, if you can cool down your head, get some cold ice water and dump it on your head, that's a great idea if you're doing anything outdoors. But it's not the time on tren to go cut the grass at 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock in the afternoon and give yourself heat exhaustion. So just a fair warning. You don't want to listen, don't listen, but that's just a fair warning for everybody. So Mobster touched on that a bit, and then why don't you talk about some training tips while on tren?
I've got one little idea, guys. I know this again from talking to my strength buddies back in the day that what Steve just said is so true. If you're the tiniest bit out of shape, you're going to really, really struggle with the heat in the summertime, and especially so when you're on tread. So here's the stories that they were telling me, which was they were going in the United Kingdom. It's not super hot most of the time. It is right now, Steve, funny enough, but it's not super hot most of the time. They're on tread. They're 150 kilos. They were getting up out of bed, Steve, and changing the sheets, especially if they were sleeping with a partner, because they were basically soaking the bed with their sweat, or they'd have to get out of bed and turn the pillows over and change their t-shirts and their shorts or whatever. So that you've got the aircon if you got it, or silent fan if you got it, is an absolute must. I would literally have a jug of ice water by the bedside. Hell, Steve, I have a bottle of dilute squash by the bedside now. And if I wake in the middle of the night, hydration is super important that way. I don't drink crazy amounts during the daytime, but funny enough, I can put away 1.5 liters between going to bed and getting up in the morning. No problem if I get up for a pee or whatever. Here's a little trick, and it's true regardless of whether you're on tread or not. And it's a simple enough one. What Steve said about soaking the t-shirt is one. Another one, funny enough, Steve, is to bag up your bed sheets and put them in the freezer or even the fridge, so that you don't soak them. You just fold them over as you would normally take them out from wherever you store them, stick them in a bag, wrap them up nice, put them in the freezer while you're doing your evening meal or something, Steve, just for an hour, and then you take them out and put them on the bed. And then you get to bed. You're going to be cool as fuck. So that's one right there. On training, and again, this is a trend thing, right? So I don't necessarily agree with the idea of suddenly increasing your volume or doing way more reps or sets or whatever kind of way you want to do the volume for, guys, as a sort of idea for cutting down. I think keeping muscle mass is more important than this idea that you're going to somehow burn off more fat by doing more reps on curls or bench or whatever else. But what I will say, and this is a tip in and of itself, guys, is do your cardio as early in the day as possible. I mean, it's a pain in the arse, Steve, at this time of year, because the goddamn sun's coming up around 4:30 in the morning. But that's when it's its coolest. If you can get up early, and it is a big if you're busy with work, family, and other commitments, but if you can get up that early, that's the time to do cardio, Steve. That's the time to go outside just before the heat of the day arrives. Certainly, like Steve said, when it comes to training, I would want my gym to be air conditioned. My gym that I go to doesn't. The gym I have here, Steve's cool all the time, but the commercial gym that I train at doesn't. But they've got one of those 3.5 foot across big industrial sized fans. Trust me, guys. Even just, I think it was late last week when I was training there, in between sets, I was going over and standing by the fan to cool down, and then coming back and doing the rest of the training that I needed to do. Adjust the clothing that you're wearing. Don't be one of those guys that thinks you're going to sweat it off by wrapping up and whatever else, guys. So that's another thing right there. Let the trend do its work. Let the Geneza Pharma trend do its work. Let the diet do its work, and maintain as much of that muscle as possible. Adjust for the simple fact it's because you're on trend, you're training for a cut. You need to have that in your mind. Make sure, of course, guys, as always, that everything else is in place. I want your head in place. Something that Steve touched upon earlier on. For a few listeners, it can be a little bit of a head fuck when you're on tread. So make sure that your life is as stress-free as possible. You just go to the gym, do what needs to be done, and then get everything done around that. Run the fridge, Steve. Meal prep, especially if you can for yourself, or buying some products. That's super, super important as well. It takes all the stress and aggravation out of your life. And one of Steve's fun last tips I'll put in here for you, Steve, is watermelon. To helping you keep hydrated, and it's great for you, and it'll help flush the system. It's something that Steve put up just this week on the forums. So come over and check us out. As always, guys, if you've got any thoughts and feedback, let us know. It's super important. We want to hear what your views are on the subject. Please note, we are not doctors, and the opinions are ours. Is our view based on our experience and views on the topic. A podcast of informational purposes and entertainment only. The freedom of speech and the First Amendment applies.